If you're an adult thinking about starting martial arts, or you just started and already feel beat up, then this video might save you from giving up. You see, most late starters don't quit because they're lazy, weak, or undisciplined. They quit because their body was never prepared for what martial arts actually demand. So here's the pattern that I see time and time again. A guy finally joins jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, whatever. He's very excited in the first couple of weeks. He shows up regularly, pushes himself, loves the grind. But then eventually reality hits. His joints start to hurt. Maybe he's accumulated a couple of injuries. His conditioning is really bad. After a couple of rounds, he gasses out. His movement is clumsy and inefficient. It feels like he's not progressing or learning at a good rate or a good pace. He doesn't realize how much recovery takes a toll on him. He struggles to recover from session to session. And on top of that, he's getting beat up by people half his size and strength. He starts to doubt, starts skipping sessions, and eventually disappears. From the outside, it looks like motivation is the problem, but it isn't. People then explain this with lazy stories. I'm too old, I'm not athletic, I'm not disciplined enough, maybe martial arts are not for me. You see, these excuses only appear once the damage is done. They don't explain the pattern, they excuse it. So the real reason why late starters quit is simple. They're trying to do martial arts with a body that has never developed the foundations that children build early on. You see, kids or early starters didn't just start training technique earlier. They have developed physical attributes and kept refining them for years. Okay? Adults usually show up without these attributes. So now you're wondering, what are these attributes? See, I have identified 5 attributes that if you build them in the correct order, you actually make martial arts learnable. So let me show you the martial foundation pyramid. This is something that I have observed myself. You know, it is not a science that exists out there. It's something that I have just noticed, and I've seen proof for it time and time again. So the martial foundation pyramid are a set of attributes and skills that I see every child possess. You know, every child that is in its teenage years even have these qualities in place. But every time I see adults or late starters coming into martial arts, they usually lack all of them, or they might have some of them. But oftentimes they are not in the right proportion, meaning that they overcompensate with certain things. And they're also not built in the correct order, which means that they create kind of a bit of a disharmony within their body. So let's have a look at them. What you see here are 5 attributes built bottom up, and each layer supports the next. Meaning that if one layer is flawed or missing, then everything that is built on top suffers as well. And they are suppleness, structure, mobility, movement, and capacity. You know, this is the order of physical qualities that are built for martial arts, that make martial arts learnable, that also equip you with the tools that when you run into an issue, you will be able to identify and solve it based on this simple map. So let's look into each of the attributes one by one. So suppleness is basically a physical condition. Okay? Again, I want you to think about the average 6 or 7-year-old child. Their bodies are quite soft. Okay? They have soft tissue. Now, if you look at the average adult, especially if they've been lifting weights and living a sedentary lifestyle, they are very rigid, okay? Very hard. Okay? That is an issue because if you meet higher forces than yourself, an opponent or the ground, and you're not supple, you can hurt yourself quite bad. Okay? If you go to the playground and you watch kids playing, they can fall off really high heights and very rarely seriously hurt themselves. Yeah, they might cry a little bit, you know, but they never seriously get injured. And then you have the adult that can miss a step walking down the stairs and break his hip and knee, you know. And it is due to that suppleness, you know, like we are so rigid, so hard, we have such a tight armor wrapping our bodies that we meet impact, we break. Okay, so that's why this is the first and most important quality that you need to develop. Then we get into structure. Okay, structures are basically shapes that you should be able to assume with your body. Okay, Simple structures are, for example, if you again take the child example, think about a child learning to walk. Until it can create a column from head to foot, head, spine, through the leg into the foot, that's a structure, it can never unlock the skill of walking. And it's the same with martial arts. Whatever your sport is, you must be able to hold the structures that are necessary for that technique to work, okay? Structures is usually not taught that way. You are shown technique, you are shown the skill, but there's an underlying structure underneath that actually makes that skill, that gives you the ability to execute that skill, okay? And don't confuse structure for strength. Yes, strength is a necessary component of it, but just being strong by lifting weights will not give you really the structures that you need for your specific sport, okay? So structure is the next practice. You have to be able to assume these things, hold them with stability, and hold them under load. They cannot collapse immediately. So the practice of structure would then be the next step. Okay, so geometry creates stability. Each structures are usually a set of angles, and they are under the laws of physics. When you investigate people in your martial art with good technique, they all usually have very good structures. So shape determines strength. Okay, shape comes first, and then the strength comes out of those shapes. I hope that makes sense. I will get into more detail in other videos. So after that, we have mobility. Okay, now when I talk about mobility, I don't mean anything too crazy. Again, look at the child on the playground. Can you do what they can do, or at least do you have the potential that you can do what they can do? Can you climb? Can you invert? Can you, squat down? Can you roll on the ground? Can you get up? Can you get down on your hands and feet? Do you have basic childlike mobility? Okay, because that's the default. And if you don't, you have to restore that. Now you can go online and see all kinds of different definitions for mobility, but for me, mobility just means movability. Do we have restrictions in the body? And if so, we have to get rid of them. Like if you cannot turn your neck fully, that's an issue. If you cannot reach behind your back with your arm, that's an issue. So we got to develop this God-given default level of mobility and be able to access it without pain. Okay, so because then the mobility then creates the freedom within the structure. Okay, and as an example, I've taken a cat and a turtle. A cat is mobile. It can move. It can go anywhere it wants. A turtle is not, because it is trapped. Okay. Now they are designed that way. I'm aware, but I'm just simply using two examples. Okay. So if you want to be the adult with good mobility, try to be more like the cat. Because we have too many turtles already. Like too many guys that look strong, look big, but can't move at all. If they fall on their back, they almost need help. Someone getting it up, carrying so much muscle. Okay, moving on. Then we get to movement. Okay, now movement is a vague term. It's really an infinite term. Like what do I mean by movement? And again, I always like to bring it back to the child example. Watch the kids on the playground. Watch what kids do when they're excited. These are super basic abilities. This is basic movement literacy. If you can't do a cartwheel as an adult, like, come on, man. Like these are things that lack. If you cannot stand on one leg and look around the space without falling over, these are these basic movement skills that you need to develop. Okay, because movement ultimately gives you orientation in space. Depending on the martial art that you choose, you have to have good movement literacy. You have to be able to learn of the skills. If you look at something like wrestling, the amount of movement literacy you need able to participate in a wrestling match is insane. Now, I have created, or I have set certain kind of standards and certain kind of milestones that everybody can reach that can actually make them ready for it. A lot of times people think they have to be insanely, they have to be super acrobats in order to start, but you don't have to. There's actually very little you need. It's very basic, and let the children be your guides. Look at your average 6-7-year-old. That's the default we have to chase as adults first. Ultimately, there's capacity, okay? And that's not really a physical attribute, that's more like of a body wisdom, okay? When you get into martial arts as a late starter, the energy demands of that sport will be immense, especially if you're super motivated and you want to participate as much as possible, okay? You have limited energy. You cannot train as much as you want to. You can only train as much as your body allows, okay? And a lot of people do not have a good relationship with the body. They don't know when to push and they don't know when to hold back. In both cases, it's an issue, you know? If you have energy and don't use it, well, what are you doing? You know, you're leaving gains on the table, skill gains. And if you're really exhausted, your nervous system is depleted, you're about to get ill, and you still keep pushing yourself because you have that grind mentality, you will also burn out and get hurt. Okay? So capacity is more about how do I manage my energy over a short period of time, like a training session, but then also weeks, months, and years. You know, because if you do not manage your energy correctly, it will also be one of the reasons why you will quit over time. Because you don't know how to pace yourself, you show up when you should rest, or you don't go at all because you feel like you're never recovered enough. You know, there's many scenarios, many variations of people not being smart about their energy use. All right, guys, so these are the 5 qualities that I want you to know about. Now, a common issue when I introduce this pyramid to someone is that they have been doing things upside down. You know, they start to do conditioning before movement. They try to learn movement before they have adequate mobility. You know, the body is locked up. They are trying to get into strength training before the body is soft and open, you know, so the tightness just further keeps trapping them in their body. It is very important that you build those attributes in the right order. You know, you can attack several attributes at the same time, but it is really important that only when one is really properly developed does it give access to the next one properly, in that sense. If you do it upside down or in the reverse order, the whole thing collapses. You see, when this foundation is missing, training no longer feels challenging, it feels destructive. If you constantly get hurt, for example, you know, even from small things that don't usually hurt other people, well, you might have a suppleness issue. You know, you're just walking around with a too tight of an armor, and your body always cracks and breaks on impact. If you always gas out, you know, you have a capacity problem. You know, if you don't know how to pace yourself, you know, how much training your body can tolerate, how you recover after sessions, you know, how you get ready for the next one, you know, by not understanding how much you should space your trainings apart, you know, you will burn out, you know. This is basic wisdom you need to have. If your body cannot do certain techniques, you know, because it feels like it's limited, well, there's a mobility issue, you know. Any challenge you will experience or any difficulty can be brought back to that map, and you can identify the issue and you can work on resolving the issue. Of course, if you don't have that map, then you know, confidence drops over time because you constantly hit the wall somehow, and at that point you quit. You know, but I want you to know you didn't quit because of weakness. You just quit because the body had a biological response for it not being prepared, not prepared properly. So I want to ask you, well, or tell you, if you quit in the past or you're close to quitting now, please understand this. You didn't fail martial arts, you failed preparation, you know, because you had no one to show you how to prepare properly. You see, martial arts is one of the only sports, it's not really a sport, really. Think about what we're doing, you know, it's martial art, it's a military art, it's a deadly sport. We've just turned it into combat sports, but it has never, it has always been used to develop, you know, people's fighting abilities. But the nature of martial art and martial art gyms is that those that have talent, those that show good genetic predisposition, they usually rise to the top, and the rest just withers away, you know, and that's a shame, you know, because I feel like if those that are not as gifted would have given a little bit more time, a little bit more instruction, they would stay, you know, because I do believe it is one of the greatest character builders. You know, it develops you in so many areas, in so many ways, but because sometimes the culture and the nature of martial arts gyms, you know, the not so gifted usually drop out, you know, and I'd like to change that. And that's exactly why I've built Enter the Dojo. Enter the Dojo is a preparation system that teaches you the 5 attributes in the correct order, so that finally you can train martial arts safely, sustainably, and you can really thrive in this environment. This is something I wished I had when I started out at 27. I came into this as a swimmer with good athletic capabilities, but then when transitioning to an impact sport, I was totally lost. So if you're serious about starting martial arts and doing it properly, then check the link in the description box and I'll see you on the inside. So stop waiting, build the foundation, and then join the Fight Club.